welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to look at hyphens, commas and adjectives. It's something that I've become interested in over the last week or so, because I've realised that a lot of the time, or maybe not a lot of the time, but there are a number of cases where it doesn't seem to follow any rules. So I thought we'd try and make things as clear as possible. And what really got me was in one of the previous classes, I think it was in the most recent class, I said a large black house, and I said that they were coordinate adjectives. And then afterwards, I had second thoughts, and I didn't actually say this in the class, but now I don't think they're coordinate adjectives, and I'm absolutely certain, in fact, that they're not. So that was a mistake in the last class. Sorry about that. I hold my hands up to it. Now, have a look at these three possibilities. A dark blue suit, which would be a cumulative adjective. I'll describe what that is in a moment. A dark blue suit with a comma, which would be a coordinate adjective. And a dark blue suit with a hyphen, which would be a compound adjective. Let me just quickly check everything looks good. Okay, yep, it all looks clear. So cumulative adjectives are when we have two adjectives together and they don't have a comma. And the idea with cumulative adjectives is that they accumulate. And I've tried to show that with this arrow. The dark is describing here blue suit. And it's saying that the blue suit is a dark one. So this modifier, the first modifier, modifies the second modifier and noun as a unit. And that's the point of drawing it like this. And by the way, this is the most common form that I have seen. I've seen it in Oxford, I've seen it in Chicago Manual of Style. However, I have also seen this one in a number of places. The universities, for example, I've seen Sussex University use this one. I've also read a number of editor blogs where they recommend using this one. However, this one is much more common. And that's what got me thinking about this. So cumulative adjectives accumulate, whereas coordinate adjectives have a comma between each adjective. And the idea is that they are 50-50 modifying the noun. The blue suit now is not being modified. It's just suit being modified by dark 50% and blue 50%. This is the rarest with this particular expression, a dark blue suit. It's extremely rare, although some of you might ask why, because it kind of makes sense, it's kind of logical. But the thing to remember about coordinate adjectives is that they modify the noun 50-50, and they must be comparable. You must be able to compare the two words here. Now, how do you know if you can compare two adjectives? Well, there are two tests which I've spoken about in other classes. To find out if it's a coordinate adjective, you have to do the AND test. Can you say dark and blue? Sounds okay to me. And then you could also have to do the swapping around test to be completely thorough. Can we say a blue dark suit? Well, that would very often mean that we're changing the meaning. If you mean a dark shade of blue, a blue dark suit is not what you want to say, and that's perhaps why number 2 is the least common. Number 3 is acceptable on a number of blogs. It's acceptable according to the Chicago Manual of Style as well. However, I've noticed that Oxford don't use it like that, and Chicago, I don't think they use it like that most of the time. Macmillan seem to have it just like this as well, Macmillan Dictionary. So you can see that it's a bit of a mess, this topic, when you look at different reference guides. Now, the reason why this is certainly possible as well is that this is a compound adjective when you join the two adjectives together with a hyphen. And I've noticed that usually we do this when the first word is a noun, and the noun, but it's a noun being used like an adjective, so it's a modifying noun phrase. And we certainly say snow white lips with a hyphen. We certainly say, snow white skin or ruby red lips with a hyphen. So I think if the first word's a noun, we very often use the hyphen. You must use the hyphen, I'd even say. However, if the first word is an adjective like light green apple, pale green top, long dark hair, light, pale and long are all adjectives. Snow and ruby are nouns. And so I would say that if the first one's an adjective, and I'm only talking about colour here, I want to make that very clear, I'm only talking about colour, because I think colour is a special case. If you're describing a shade of colour and the first word is an adjective, I would actually go without the hyphen. But if the first word is a noun, I would include the hyphen. And you've got navy blue then, and I wondered about navy blue, because I'm sure I've seen it without a hyphen. And when I check Oxford, they have it without a hyphen in some sentences and with a hyphen in other sentences. So extremely inconsistent is the Oxford Dictionary's approach, unfortunately. So, I mean, you don't take my word for it. Always use dictionaries if you're learning a language. Type navy blue into Oxford Dictionary, click on more examples, and you will see navy blue without a hyphen plus a noun, and navy blue with a hyphen plus a noun. So that's extremely inconsistent. Now I want you to remember that even though we use a hyphen here, when we've got the compound adjective before the noun, if the compound adjective comes after the noun, for example, his skin was snow white, or his lips were ruby red, then you need to take away the hyphen. If the compound adjective comes after the noun, take out the hyphen. Okay, that's a little hyphen rule. And the same here with navy blue sweater. If you're going to say his sweater was navy blue, definitely get rid of the hyphen. But before the noun, well, but I see both of them in Oxford, and I see both of them in Chicago Manual of Style. So it looks like both 1 and 3 are possible with a number of shades of colour. So I was just talking about colour there, but I hope you can see that with a compound adjective, this is taken as a unit, and it really, dark blue describes a particular shade of colour, just like navy blue does, and that modifies the noun as a compound. However, coordinate adjectives, they work 50-50 on the noun, and cumulative adjectives, well, that one describes that one plus the noun. So they are working differently. So what about these commas? What about these cumulative adjectives and coordinate adjectives? Well, we do a test to see if they're coordinate. We see if we can swap them round. A blue dark suit. Now, to me, that sounds very unnatural. Now, why does it sound unnatural? Because in English, we have the royal order of adjectives. Now, what this means is when we have a number of different adjectives before a noun like cheese, we start with the opinion adjective, then we use the size adjective, then shape, then age, then colour, then nationality, then material, then type. So a tasty, thin, round, old, yellow, French, cream, camembert cheese. And apparently none of these would have commas. Now, why wouldn't we have commas between any of those adjectives? It's because they accumulate. If they follow the order of adjectives going down, they are cumulative. They go in order. However, if we want to find coordinate adjectives, they have to be in the same group. A very common example is a red, white and blue flag. All the colours are in the same group. They're all in the colour group. And so they can be compared. They are similar adjectives. And because they can be compared, they can have a, each of these is modifying the noun flag. And so you can use them in a coordinate fashion. It's the same with adjectives of opinion, a nice tasty sandwich with a comma. However, things are never ever this easy in grammar. I've learnt this. There are always exceptions. And so even the royal order of adjectives, in spite of the fact that it's royal, it doesn't always work. For example, a tall, dark and handsome stranger. If you look at tall, you'd think size. If you look at dark, you might think colour. And then if you look at handsome, you think opinion. So it's not following the royal order of adjectives. And with this expression, we nearly always see it with commas. A tall, dark and handsome stranger. And so the adjectives are being used in a coordinate way. In other words, I think they're all being used as if they're opinion adjectives. And I think especially up to here, or maybe here, quite often we mix the order of adjectives into different, we mix them up, we put them in different ways, and we don't necessarily follow the order of adjectives. And if that's the case, I think that we can make adjectives coordinate even when they appear in different groups. But here it's really coming on to writer's style, the author's style. And so sometimes an author may have a good reason for putting in a comma. And what started off all of this, me thinking about this idea of when do adjectives need commas and when do they need hyphens and when don't they, I thought about Silly Black Hats, which was in the Roald Dahl book when I was going through that book. And you notice that Roald Dahl definitely didn't use a comma between silly and black. Silly would be opinion, black would be colour, and so he's going down the list and he's thinking we don't need a comma here. And I've noticed that with colour adjectives, usually there's no comma before the colour when there's an opinion adjective here, usually, most of the time. And so when I said a large black house, I think I should have said that they accumulate this expression, a large black house. Now, I read an editor's blog where he said that a tall green pole, you can say a green tall pole. And that surprised me because we very rarely say that. We'd nearly always say tall green pole. It would be size first and then colour. But he seemed to argue that you could swap these round and so they could be coordinate adjectives. Well, they're not most of the time. I guarantee it. Look up colours before nouns on hundreds of different websites and you'll usually see just tall green pole, which is good because it's following the cumulative adjectives go in order rule, and so it's kind of following the rules. It's tall, dark and handsome that I don't like because it seems to be disobeying the rules. They come from different groups here. Tall is definitely size, handsome is certainly opinion, and dark, well, really it's closer to colour than anything else. There are some exceptions to this rule that cumulative adjectives go in order and don't use commas, and coordinate adjectives are in series. You can compare them, they're in a list. So what about when you have really long lists? It seems to me that when you get really long lists, quite often you might see writers put in a comma here. Personally, I wouldn't, because they are cumulative adjectives. So they do accumulate, but you might see writers put one in here to try and show that the abandoned building is both black and large. And of course, when you put the comma in there, it does do that. Now, I wanted to show you a few other intriguing things about these commas and hyphens and adjectives. And I'm going to show it back up here, because I want to point out some of the things which I read online were quite interesting concerning these commas and hyphens. And so one writer pointed out that if you take a word like light, light is an adjective, but it's has two different meanings at least. Light can mean of a light shade of colour, but light is the opposite of heavy as well. And so he recommended a light green suit, or shirt or whatever, a light green shirt with a hyphen if you mean the colour, whereas a light green package, meaning not a heavy package, which was green, would be best over here, a light green package. And this way we can see the difference. That one could only mean the colour, light green shirt, and this one must mean not heavy and green. Although I must admit, I think it's arguable that you could have a comma there as well, because when you're dealing with weight, it's more like size. Green is down in colour. So it seems to me you could make them coordinate adjectives as well. A light and green package, a green and light package. So it could be, one writer made a good point there that I think it was an editor, I think his name was Mark Nicol, so very similar to my name, but light green with a hyphen, it's really clear that you're dealing with the colour. You couldn't possibly be dealing with a non-heavy form of green. And so I agree with Mark that that's a nice clear distinction. and that helps you to show the difference between these, between the shade of colour and between the meaning, which means not heavy. So that's another thing that's really worth remembering. But generally speaking, coordinate adjectives are in the same group and go along, and cumulative adjectives are in different groups and go down. And these ones we don't use commas, and these ones we do. Use hyphens for when you're bringing together the two forms into an adjective. And I think it's very common when the first word here is a noun, like snow white, jet black, navy blue, emerald green, ruby red, all of those kind of compound adjectives. Definitely you need a hyphen. Okay, I hope that has cleared up some confusion. I hope it hasn't just added more confusion to what is already quite an annoying topic, because it really does depend on your opinion, some of this. There are a number of phrases, like an ugly old building. You nearly always, a big old ugly building. A big old ugly building. You put your opinion adjective at the end after big and old. So it's another example of how we don't always follow this order of adjectives, and that's perhaps why it's not always clear whether a combination should be coordinate or cumulative. Okay, any questions, please put them under the video. If you've liked this lesson, subscribe and like the video, and I hope to see everybody soon.